Welcome back to another episode of A Gift from Adversity. My name is Juri Love. I'm your host. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today, we have an exciting guest, and this is going to be episode 103. Before I introduce my guest today, I want to introduce my book, which is called A Gift from Adversity, which is the same title of this this podcast, A Gift from Adversity. The subtitle of this book is Overcoming Sexual Abuse, Domestic Violence, Bullying, and Homelessness. And this is about my life story growing up in Japan. And I felt very compelled to start a podcast platform, not only my book, to share my adversity, but to share other people's adversities. And I cannot believe that I have over 100 episodes, and my guests are from all over the world sharing their adversities, but also the tools that they use to overcome and the gift that came from it. So let's invite tonight's guest. Hello, Kevin. Thank you so much for being on A Gift from Adversity tonight.
Thank you, Juri, and it's my honor, my pleasure to be with someone that I know that's famous and such a gifted person. I am the one that's honored, so thank you.
Well, thank you. Let's get started. So, Kevin, if you can introduce yourself, your name, where you're coming in from today, and what you do, and if you have any website, social media that people can follow.
All right, my name is Kevin McLemore. There's several things that I do. I am better known in the Philadelphia area as one of the top fitness professionals at Lifetime Athletics. I've been in the business for over 40 years, but I'm also an award-winning author of one book, Sprinkles, the True Spirit of Christmas, and it's available on Amazon. All my books are available on Amazon. So if you Google Kevin McLemore or books by Kevin McLemore, three books will pop up. Indispensable Games of X's and O's. It's my story of how I learned everything about life. I learned playing high school football. The second is another coming to age story that I recently released on Valentine's Day. It's called Dating with a Full Deck. I took a divorce and made something positive out of it. So it is basically a guide in order for men and women, no matter in the dating process or in a healthy relationship, to remind each other your responsibility and the truth within your heart towards your mate. And it's also the kicker is how not to screw up an opportunity to have a second date. And so I have a podcast, two podcasts. One is Talking Wit, WIT, Kevin and Son, and we showcase people you should know. So anyone that's doing anything in the community that's giving back is someone that I'll have on my show. I'm not looking for the guest that shows up on Good Morning America or those primetime TVs. I'm looking for the stories that normally never get told. And I was honored to have you on my podcast. If you look at us on YouTube, look at RMK Productions and Network, you'll find the Jury Love Story, The Goddess of Connection. That was our most recent release. I also do another fun podcast where I have over 300 motivational quotes I've written for the content of my books, but I was always curious with conversations of quote, how they landed with other people. So I created a show called Motivational Sundays with Kevin and friends, and we talk about these quotes based on our perception or interpretation. You'll be surprised on how many different ways people see and how a quote will land on them. So that is my story, and I'm available on Facebook by Kevin McLemore. I'm available on Instagram by P. Kevin McLemore, and that's about it. I don't do much of social media, but anyway, thank you again for allowing me to. I hate talking about myself, but anyway, thank you.
Well, thank you, Kevin. And he generously sent these three books that he mentioned, and I started to read some of them. And I just got a third book from him, which I can't wait to read. So thank you so much for sharing your gift with me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. So let's dive into our questions. The first question I ask to all my guests is, what was your adversity?
Well, There's a long list. I mean, if you lived on this earth as long as I have lived, um, at different levels of your life, like I talk about, um, your why, our why constantly gets redefined on different phases of our life. My first phase was finding out who I was. Um, at the age of 8, I came home. And I was a typical third grader. I came home that evening and found out that my life had changed. My mother had decided to move to Beverly Hills 9021. We were a resident of Dayton, Ohio, living on 559 Cedarhurst Street. My father was lucky enough to inherit me and my brothers, and while my mother went out to discover who she was in California. My father systematically, figured out a way to have a better relationship with alcohol than he did with his kids. But we were lucky enough. My father put us in a safe place. I was raised by my grandparents, my father's parents. So the first adversity that I was challenged with was my life that I had no control over. And I knew early on in my life, when I got to a point that I had control over my life, I was going to do some things different. Now, I praise my mother and my father, and they were both good people, but they made decisions that were best for them. I love both my parents. Today, I have a great relationship. So, understanding what adversities are, you have to realize that there are challenges that happens to each individual, be it within the relationship, within the family dynamics, be it within the system or the community, or just environment. So my first adversity was self-acceptance. you know I didn't like being a statistic, of being a person of color. I was lucky that my grandparent did not put us on public assistance, taught me how to work and show up for a day's pay, but I always wanted more. And it took a while for me to discover what I really want and what really changed and how I overcame adversity. Is if you look at the first couple of chapters of my book, X's and O's, is that I was being chased home while someone was shooting at me. And I promised myself that in the event that I made it home safely without any bullet holes in my body, that I was going to make some different decisions. I was going to change. So I found out two things that night. I found out, one, I had a closer relationship with God than I knew at that point. And then I found out that I also had world class speed at that time, which landed me in a good place on a football team in high school. So that was my adversity, my first level of adversity. There's many more.
Well, I read some of your book and thank you again. And let's focus on not the tools, but the adversity part. Let's dissect a little bit. I know that you had some comment made when you were eighth grader by a teacher. Would you share that?
Oh, something that was probably the best thing that has ever been said to me is someone telling me what I wasn't going to be. I had an eighth grade teacher. I didn't mention the fact that I was a little challenging as a child. Most people would call you the class clown or whatever. I was a little different. I knew I was special, didn't know why. I didn't know at the time that I had ADHD. I wasn't diagnosed until I was 50 years old. But because I was such a entertaining individual as a youth, in the eighth grade, I was told that I was going to amount to nothing more than just a janitor. And I will say this was a white teacher telling a black child that he was going to be nothing more than a janitor. I always knew I had greatness within me. I always knew that I had a power, something special about me, and that just fueled the fire. Because the one thing that I was going to do was prove her wrong, not right. So from that decision on, I decided to be extraordinary with some of the things and choices I made. So that was the first um, match under my butt that lit the fire. And I will thank you. I don't know if the teacher's still living or not, but I want to thank the first individual that told me what I wasn't going to be, because I've lived my whole entire life proving her wrong.
Let's go back. So I told my son about it, and he is in sixth grade. And what if somebody said that to him? And guess what he said to me?
What?
That teacher will be fired because my mom is a reporter.
Well,
And,
you,
and
uh,
just to let you know, the magnitude of those comments, now you kind of eloquently said after the facts, but do you remember how you felt when you were in eighth grade?
well, I grew up angry as a child.
Mm.
Um, is because there were a lot of things or events that were happening in my life that I had no control over. I didn't like being poor. Um, I didn't like that society looked at a black male as more of a criminal than an asset to the community. I didn't like that, didn't have access to the same level of education as my other counterparts. But I didn't lean on that. I always knew I had more. I always knew I had greatness in there. I knew there was something special. Um, and how I felt, like I said, I was angry, and angry landed me on the football field. I mean, I had a couple of choices, and thank God I made the right choices, because I could have followed and been part of the system, or I could have, you know, did what I'm currently doing, is be an example of what happens when you go against the system.
And then what are the other adversity that you experienced?
Well, I was small as a football player, and I got very, very lucky that if you read the book, and there is a guy by the name of Joe Russo, which was assistant football coach. Funny story. At freshman, I had never played football in my life. Matter of fact, my father said football players were stupid. He was more of a baseball player, and it was a young lady that in our gym class, the freshman class, Coach Russo was our gym coach, and he asked, while he was taking roll, he asked how many of the young men were going to come out for football. So everyone kind of raised their hand, and there was this beautiful girl that was in there at the time, light skin, light color eyes, Pam Jones, and she was looking at me, and I kind of thought she was looking, to say, well, Kevin, if you played football, then I'm going to come to every game. So without it saying, I kind of raised my hand, because every other boy had his hand up, and said I was coming out for football. I went 2 weeks. Didn't have all the information about playing high school football. Didn't know that I was supposed to come home sweaty, smelly, and dirty and whatever. I came home every evening for 2 weeks, basically in shorts and a t-shirt. Went out, did my time, came back in, told my father some wonderful stories about football practice. And after 2 weeks, my father came home, worked from his third shift job with a friend of his, which happens to had a son that was playing football, and gave me a ride to football practice. And I thought of 1,000 different excuses to not have my father drive me to practice, because I knew if my father had found out I lied to him, because two things he did not tolerate: liars and thieves. And and the punishment was horrible. And so in this little Impala, Chevy Impala, he drove me down. And I remember seeing the football field for the first time. It was Grace A. Green, and it was in a little bit of a valley. And before the car stopped, I jumped out, ran down to the only familiar face that I knew, and I said, Mr. Russo, I told my father I was a football team. If he found out I lied, he would kill me. Coach Russo looked up at the hill. My father looked down at him, and my life changed that day. Coach Russo said, "Go over there," and I lined up with the other teammates that were part of the freshman class of the Mighty Teddies at Dayton Roosevelt, and that was a bullet that I dodged. Um, Beginning of my adversities, I was probably one of the smallest people on the team. And if you listen to my interview with Coach Russo, and I asked him why he placed me at nose guard, and he said that I was so angry he had to put me someplace where it was safe for my other teammates. So I had to overcome some personal anger issues that I had, and I didn't even know I had them, but I did have them.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that story. And is there other more when you're growing up, the adversity?
Well, there are a ton of adversities. Being a high school student, being a standout athlete, being on a team with others, you're always trying to find a way to belong. And luckily, I was with a good group of people. I suffered my first heartbreak, like most people do, going through your childhood. Um, you know, high school football gave me the opportunity to get a college education. Unfortunately, my childhood sweetheart, going through, I think I was 20, 21, my high school sweetheart became pregnant. I um, I brought my lovely daughter Lakeisha Camille McLemore to the world, and as I was about to graduate from college, I was actually a single father because we had broken up, raising my daughter and taking my daughter to school while I was trying to graduate from college. So I had to become a man early on in life, and the first responsibility. And when you talk about adversity, it's like you don't know what life challenges you until you have the responsibility of someone else's life. I had to step up big time, and life got real serious when I became a father. And the one thing I did not want to do is repeat the sins of my parents. I wanted to become a better parent to my child than my parents were. And and I'm not saying that my parents were bad parents. I just think my the decisions my parents made weren't popular amongst their children. Because I love my dad. I loved him till the day he died. I love my mother and I have a great relationship with her today. Hadn't always been that way. But, that was just the trials and tribulation. But the one thing when I talk about a thing that really changed me is I almost graduated from college without formally being able to read or write. I decided in my junior year that I was not going to graduate as a dumb jock. Um, I probably haven't said it to a lot of people. I've written it in my book, so those people that have read the book, they know this story. But I decided that I was going to, not graduate as a dumb jock. So that was a hurdle that I had to overcome. And it's just like if you look up diversity, diversity is just the challenges that you have in your life. A lot of people, go through life and they hold on to things that's holding them back, and they allow their life not to move forward. Um, I always knew, and I still know to this very day, that this life has wonderful things waiting for me. And I just have to continue to push forward in order to acquire not only the knowledge, or not only the skill, but also the patience to receive those gifts.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Um, so before we move on to the tools that you use to overcome those things, is there anything left on the table as far as talking about your layer of adversities?
Um, I I'm even going. There's a countless numbers of adversities. Um, 2014 fell off the ladder, broke my neck. I gained massive amount of weight. I went from being a physical example of what fitness looks like to being a client of my own business. Um, what was it? Um, it took me 6 surgeries to get my life back. And the first thing a doctor told me is that, I'm never going to be able to go back to the life that I had before I had fallen off the ladder. And luckily for me, he said those magic words, told me what I can't do. The first question I asked him, I said that, with the experimental technology they put into my neck, the hardware, I asked him what any of the other 6 people that had the same hardware, fit or active people. He says, no. And I said, then I'm going to come back and I'm going to tell you how this is going to work with a healthy, active person. 2019, going through the pandemic, just before the pandemic, 2019, I was struck in the head with a dumbbell and received a massive concussion, which actually wiped out my memory. So my mind actually functions right now as if you watch the movie Matrix, the little numbers and stuff that come along, that's the way my head functions all the time. Sometimes I slur my speech, sometimes I can't remember a word. I apologize all the time because one moment I'm present, the other time the consciousness is not there. But lucky for me that I've journaled since 1973 to the accident that happened March 1st, 2019. If it had not been for that journal, indispensable games of X's and O's would not exist because everything I learned about life, I learned playing high school football, and it came from my journal. That book came from my journal. Everything that I had written down about my life, events, both positive and negative, came from that. How I overcame things came from that, and that's in that book. So not only was that a struggle, and that's the reason why I say life constantly challenges you. The pandemic hit, and I had on a Tuesday morning basically challenged COVID because I had not been sick for 8 years. And Tuesday morning, I basically called out COVID and said, COVID ain't got S on me because I hadn't been sick. Everyone else was getting around sick. And then that Friday at 8:30 a.m., one of my clients had told me that they had tested positive for COVID. And the protocol for our job was that we had to go ahead and remove ourselves from public, get tested and whatever. So um, that Friday, I got tested at 10, did not receive the answers to my test until 1 a.m. that Sunday morning. And when COVID hit me, COVID basically says, Mr. McLemore, we heard what you said and we want to prove you wrong. COVID came at me like it was Muhammad Ali doing a rope a dope and knocking me out like he did Joe Frazier. Um, Lost 21 pounds. Actually thought I was going to die. Ended up in Paoli Hospital with an IV in my arm. And that was one of the things. And I realized, I said on my third day, I had lost so much weight, had not had the ability to swallow. I literally had to lay on my back and put ice chips in my mouth and allow them to melt because I could not swallow in order to hydrate myself. But the one thing I laid on my back and I said, I can leave this world if this is the way God wants my life to end. And I can honestly say I've not screwed over one person in my life that I can remember. But God gave me a second chance and I'm living. And the one thing that I have always said, and I did this through college, and it got me through college. There was a poem that said, "Don't quit." It said, "When things go wrong, as you sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high, rest if you must, but don't you sigh. Um, Life is pressing down you a bit, but rest if you must, but don't you quit." And it goes on and on and on. But that's something I recite every single time that I get my back against the wall. And the hard part about being in college was I didn't know I was poor until I had a rich roommate. So when you talk about again adversities, adversities are always on the next door. It's how you deal with those adversities. And I would say resilient is the key to is one of the keys to my success. And I'm not giving the tools yet because there are some tools.
Sure. So, how are you doing? Like with the COVID and with the head injury, like are you still suffering from head injury till these days? Like today, from the 2019 um dumbbell accident too.
Well, one is that I look at everything that has come into my life as gifts, as tools that I use to move forward. It is part of my story. Um, I look at my stories. I can define my story at the end of the day as a drama or a dramedy, comedy, or it could be the best love story that anyone's ever told. I chose to stay in the positive. I deal with the concussion every single day, um, and it's been diagnosed as traumatic head injury. So I used to be depressed, and I had bouts of depression. I had conversations in my head that says basically I got tired and didn't want to live this life, but I never felt suicidal. But I got tired, and then the part of me that wants to fight. You're living with ADHD, and the hard part of any disability or any time that you are trying to overcome something tough is a lot of times people um, don't pay attention to what you're going through because we're all going through something. We pay so much attention to our own life. Um, they don't understand what you're going through. And one of the things that I live with is that everything's up to me. Everything begins and ends with me. If I choose to be depressed about something, then I'm going to be depressed. If I choose to be happy about something, then I'm going to choose to be happy. If I looked at ADHD as a disability, then I'm going to be disabled. I look at everything that's happened to me as a gift. When I stutter and I can't remember something or whatever, I laugh. Laughter has been the key to living with what Kevin is. I am special, and that's why I look at it. I am a gift, and that's what I look at it. One thing that came out of my concussion, I can draw my ass off right now. I couldn't before. I was a little cartoonist, and I was 3 degrees above six stick figures. but I've shared some of my artwork with you. I get a gift. And God has given me the ability not only to communicate with my style, but He's given me a way to get share my message and empower other people through the words and that's on my book. I'm not a literary genius, but I am a master storyteller.
Thank you so much, Kevin. So let's move on to the second question, which is the tools that you use to overcome. And you shared a lot during the interview, the first question, but this is very special part of the podcast to me because my story is overcoming the sexual abuse, domestic violence, bullying, homelessness. My book, A Gift from Adversity, is majority of it was my father and two uncles who sexually abused me. And a lot of times when I share my story in my adversity, people would casually say, "Oh, just go get a therapist." But that's not that how it works. It's like 1 week, an hour session. Well, I did 6 years. It kind of helped. But what is the best tool that helped me is something that nobody told me. So, this podcast, every guest that came to my show had very unique, tangible tools, special tools that they overcame their adversity or dealing with the adversity. And that is absolutely my favorite part. And then I would like you to share the top tools that you use to overcome these multiple layers of adversities that truly worked for you.
I would say, I would love to say that I had top two tools, but there's many layers to it. The first is believing in yourself and believing that you deserve the life that you're living right now and taking control of that. If I would say believe in yourself, there is absolutely nothing you can do to change the past. The only thing that you can do is, you as much as you like, you can set goals to predict the future, but you need to look down at your feet. Every step you take needs to take you directly to where you want to be or stand where you are and accept where you are right now. And the one thing is, I bet on myself. I believe in me. I believe in winning. There's no question. No one outworks me. No one else. When other people are asleep, I'm getting things done. My top tool is to believe in myself, to be the author of my own story. There's a happy ending at the end of Kevin's life. I was born December 10th, 1958. That dash is how I live. That number that will be on my tombstone will be the story other people will tell. I am never going to die. And that's what I believe. My gift in myself, and that one thing is I don't quit. I don't quit on Kevin. And if I would tell anybody else that is going through whatever has happened, because many of the things that you just mentioned that have happened to you happened to me. I know what it's like to be homeless. I know what it's like to have someone leave you and abandon you. I know what it's like to have someone cheat on you. I know what it's like for someone to steal every single dime you had. But if you buy into what everyone else has control, your life will never be controlled by you. You've got to take control of your life. Life is about two things: chance and choice, and the actions that follow both of them. And I bet on me.
I do have a comment and question about that. So I thank you for sharing your tools. When you go through multiple layers of adversity, self-sabotage become your friend. Believing yourself is such a difficult thing to do. And I had I had those issues where even when I was doing Don't Look Up, I had nervous breakdown. It's not like I didn't believe in yourself, but I have to tell myself to believe in myself. I got this opportunity because I belong here. I worked hard to get here. But how do you believe in yourself? Like when you are coming from such layers of adversities, what is the tool that you are able to truly believe in yourself and trust in you?
Well, believe it or not, the conversation we're having now, it's like what has happened to me has happened. You can either move forward with it or you move forward without it. I'm not saying don't acknowledge that it's never happened. It's that you don't have to carry it with you. What happened to me yesterday is in the past. Um, you know, I'm overcoming some adversities now. My current situation, my relationship is in peril right now, which I can't control. April 22nd, I had what's called a practice heart attack because my blood pressure had been sky high. I've been training for a half marathon, and I was dealing with something I had no other control. When a person comes to you and said they no longer want to be with you, or they make decisions that question your personal relationship, you happen to look at yourself and go, "What did I do wrong?" And then the reality check comes in, and we all get to these dark places. And there's nothing wrong with that because we're human beings. And then I realized, I said, the decisions that she makes are not the best decisions for me. And that's with anything, with a job and whatever. When it's time for you to leave work, when you show up 30 minutes late and 30 minutes early for a job, and you sit in the parking lot contemplating doing other things, and you show up 10 minutes late, it's time for you to go. So whatever happened to me before, it becomes part of my story. I'm writing a happy ending every single day, and it's resilience. Your ability to push forward, and stuff is always going to happen. You always got to remember, life is like different seasons. It's going to be summertime, it's going to be fall. You're going to have 10 degrees below zero and you got to wear a coat. And then the spring comes. you know you have to adjust to the seasons and believe that you're going to do well. And as long as God gives you breath and you're trying and you're putting forth the tools and you surround yourself by people that support you and believe in you, and I think that's the real key, is surrounding yourself with either people that are going to where you like to go, or people that have been where you are, or genuine people that support you. And you'll always will know when someone is in your corner, is when something good happens to you, they congratulate you. They don't talk about your back, behind your back, and whether they support you. You always know when you have a good friend because they'll be there before you need them. I travel around with a very unique circle of friends that we have a rule. You ask for help, we'll be there, but make sure that when you ask, that help doesn't hurt anybody, because otherwise we won't be there. All my friends have a higher call to action. I've added you to that circle, and my commitment to you is that when you need me, I will be there. You know, we all have the capability of changing. Just some of us are afraid to actually change. And fear is probably the most toxic thing that we all live in. You know, um, we have events that appear to be real and they're not. And the nice thing about failure is that experiences about life that make you grow. You know, I'm I'm living a life. I'm not dying and trying to live. I'm living a life. So if I had to say the one tool that anyone will have and that I can give to anyone is don't give up on yourself.
Thank you so much for this conversation, Kevin. I really feel that we suffer a lot, especially older generations that never had an opportunity to talk about mental health, adversity, the tools that you just mentioned, and the conversation itself, like podcasts such as this one.
True.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about their adversities, sexual abuse, any traumatic things. And I truly like resonate with you about the season analysis, because when you are, for instance, having a panic attack from the fear that you had experienced in your life, it feels forever, and it feels it's never gonna end. And I was hospitalized for a panic attack, and then it didn't really help. But at the end of the day, all the medical things when you read it, it's just gonna go away without a treatment. And people don't realize, just like a panic attack, the adversity is like seasonal. Sometimes it comes and goes. And I really love everything you said during this podcast, that things happens and then it really, you know, it's really up to you to either move forward or dwelling to it, to the past, and then not believing in yourself and an ability. And it's as easy as you eloquently stated, it is not easy to actually
True.
do that. And especially when things happen, and especially when you have those adversities within you, you always start to blame yourself, shame yourself. I don't know why. But then believing yourself, believing in myself, sometimes it's tough. So thank you so much for sharing that tool.
Well, thank you for allowing me. And like you said, it is sometimes tough, and we all get into that space. But it's just like I listened to your story, and we talked, and you were on my podcast. Something happened within you that brought you to the other side. And the nice thing about it is that I exercise kindness every single day, because I never know if someone's going through something a lot worse than um, than I'm doing, what I'm going through, and and just being kind to each other. I have a hashtag is find 1,000 reasons to be kind to someone, and I came about with that hashtag. I took a counter and I said, for 12 hours that I was working, how many positive interactions did I have with people? And at the end of the day was 1,000. And I said, God is always telling me, like the book that I'm working on, the world's not ready for you right now, that I'm illustrating. I believe God's helping me write that. Um, and sprinkles, it's all about being kind to people. Indispensable games is finding your own truth. um Dating with the full deck is about being honest within yourself before you bring someone else in your life. Every book that I write has a theme coming that's in it, bringing people closer together. And the only way that um you utilize your gift, it's like what you do with your journalism, what you do with your kids, putting them out into the world, what you do with this podcast, whatever. You're educating people and giving people a safe place in order to have these uncomfortable conversations, because it's hard to talk about mental illness. you know I understood when I got this concussion, and I've had many playing sports before, is that I understand why people check out of life, because when you got people that look at you and you feel normal, you look normal, but your head is fragmented, you just want you want to stop living. But then there's something else in a special group of people that says, something, you're here to help other people, and you're a servant, you're a disciple of God, you're a warrior for women. And I would say shame on those people that um, wronged you and took advantage of you. But I say, look at you right now, and look how you shine right now. You know, I've known we've known each other in the virtual world for years, and then within the last couple of weeks, we finally met in the present. This is God's work. This is God's work. He brought us together to have this conversation. I hope that the people that are listening to this podcast realize that if you're sitting here listening to this is God's work. It's a message for you to change. It's a message for you to stop feeling sorry for yourself, and um, accept your gift and do something with your superpower. And the first thing you got to do with your superpower is give yourself permission to be special and live.
Well, thank you so much, Kevin. So my last question is a gift that came from it. And you mentioned the word gift multiple times, but what do you think the best gift that came from your adversity?
My children. That has been my biggest gift, and even and I'll say my wife, even though we're going through something, those are my gifts. Those are the biggest gifts, and everything else is. um, extra special gifts that allows me to give back to the people in this world. But I will say that the gift is my children. Family comes first. God comes first. Family comes first. However you want to say it, they come first.
Thank you very much. And my bonus question to you, and then for the audience too, Kevin, if anyone's listening to this podcast, your interview, your story is maybe going through what you went through when you were a kid or when you're in young age that you mentioned, what is your biggest advice for those people who might be going through a hard time?
My biggest advice is that it's going to get better. You've got to believe it's going to get better. It's what you're going through right now is not permanent. It's a test. It's a test of your free will. And if you will your life to be better, it's going to get better. I said this early on, no matter how dark it may seem, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Don't give up on you. Don't depend on anyone to save you unless you save yourself. My son always told me, "How do you learn to swim?" My answer was, hire a coach. He says, "Dad, you to get in the water. If you want to save yourself, you've got to live this life like you're trying to get air after being underwater for, until the point you're about the, to pass out. If you want to live, then you got to live. Don't carry drama with you. Don't add negative people to your life because you want to be kind to someone. When they get heavy, let them go. Live and live life on your terms, but just live.
Well, thank you very much, Kevin, again for being on A Gift from Adversity tonight.
Thank you for having me on your show, and thanks to your listeners for putting up with my rambling. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And for the guests who's listeners who are listening and tuning in, thank you again. And I'm planning to have this conversation in the future, more of episodes with guests from all over the world. Thank you again. Have a wonderful night.
Good night, everyone.